Sarah Martinez had always been fascinated by royal ceremonies. Growing up in a small town in Spain, she dreamed of visiting magnificent palaces and witnessing the grandeur of monarchy firsthand. When she turned 25, she finally saved enough money to take her dream trip to England. The highlight of her vacation would be watching the famous changing of the guard ceremony at Buckingham Palace. On a crisp October morning, Sarah joined hundreds of tourists gathering outside the palace gates. The crowd was buzzing with excitement, cameras ready to capture every moment of the traditional ceremony. Sarah squeezed through the masses, trying to get a better view of the guards in their iconic red uniforms and tall black hats. As she watched the perfectly synchronized movements of the guards, something caught her attention. One particular guard seemed different from the others. While his colleagues maintained their stoic expressions and rigid postures, this guard appeared to be struggling. His face was pale and beads of sweat were visible on his forehead despite the cool weather. Sarah noticed the guard's hands trembling slightly as he held his rifle. His breathing seemed labored and she could see him swaying almost imperceptibly. The other tourists around her were busy taking photos and chatting excitedly, completely unaware of what she was observing. Having worked as a nurse for 3 years before taking this vacation, Sarah recognized the signs immediately. The guard was experiencing what appeared to be a medical emergency. His symptoms suggested he might be having a panic attack or worse, some kind of cardiac episode. The rigid training and discipline required of royal guards meant he couldn't simply break formation or ask for help during the ceremony. Sarah's heart raced as she watched the guard's condition worsen. She knew that these ceremonial duties often lasted for extended periods, and the guards were trained to stand perfectly still, regardless of weather conditions or personal discomfort. Many guards had fainted during ceremonies in the past, but this seemed more serious. The crowd around her continued their cheerful chatter, pointing at different guards and taking selfies. Children sat on their parents' shoulders for better views, and tour guides shared historical facts about the ceremony. Nobody else seemed to notice that one of the guards was in distress. Sarah felt torn between respecting the formality of the occasion and her instinct to help someone in medical need. She understood that interrupting a royal ceremony could have serious consequences. Security was tight around the palace, and any disruption would likely result in immediate detention by police officers stationed throughout the area. But as she continued watching, the guard's condition appeared to deteriorate further. His face had gone from pale to almost gray, and she could see him struggling to maintain his upright position. His rifle seemed to be getting heavier in his hands, and his knees appeared to be buckling slightly. Sarah made a quick decision. She couldn't stand by and watch someone potentially collapse or suffer a serious medical episode without trying to help. She began moving closer to the guard, carefully navigating through the dense crowd of spectators. As she got nearer, she could see more clearly that the guard was indeed in significant distress. His eyes, while still focused straight ahead as required by protocol, showed clear signs of panic and discomfort. She could hear his breathing was shallow and rapid, despite his attempts to maintain military bearing. Sarah knew she needed to act quickly but discreetly. She couldn't simply shout out or run toward the guard, as this would cause chaos and potentially put both herself and the guard in danger. The other guards and security personnel would immediately respond to any perceived threat or disruption. Looking around, she noticed several plainclothes security officers positioned strategically throughout the crowd. They were easy to spot once you knew what to look for. Their alertness, their positioning, and their constant scanning of the crowd gave them away. But they were all focused on potential external threats, not on the welfare of the guards themselves. Sarah realized she needed to find a way to communicate the emergency without causing panic or disruption. The ceremony was still in progress, and hundreds of people were watching and recording. Any dramatic intervention would create chaos and potentially make the situation worse for everyone involved. She remembered reading about subtle communication methods used in emergency situations. Military and security personnel often used discreet hand signals and codes to communicate without drawing attention. But Sarah wasn't trained in these methods, and she couldn't be sure that any signal she tried to give would be understood correctly. As she wrestled with these thoughts, the guard's condition seemed to reach a critical point. She could see him fighting to stay conscious, his grip on his rifle loosening, and his body swaying more noticeably. She estimated he had perhaps minutes before he would either collapse or be forced to break protocol to seek help. The crowd around her continued their enthusiastic observation of the ceremony, completely unaware of the drama unfolding before their eyes. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She might be the only person in position to prevent a potential tragedy. Taking a deep breath, Sarah began formulating a plan. She needed to alert the authorities about the guard's condition without causing a scene. She had to find a way to communicate urgently and clearly while respecting the dignity of both the ceremony and the guard who was suffering. The seconds felt like hours as she watched the guard struggle to maintain his position. His training and dedication were keeping him upright, but Sarah could see that his body was reaching its limits. She knew that royal guards were selected for their physical and mental strength, but everyone had breaking points. As Sarah prepared to take action, she caught the guard's eye for just a moment. In that brief glance, she saw gratitude mixed with desperation. He somehow understood that she had noticed his plight and was trying to help. This silent connection between a tourist and a royal guard would soon lead to an extraordinary chain of events that neither of them could have imagined. The ceremony continued around them, but for Sarah and the struggling guard, time seemed suspended. She was about to make a decision that would not only potentially save his life, but also create a story that would be remembered for years to come. The next few moments would test her courage, her compassion, and her ability to think quickly under pressure. Sarah quickly scanned the area for someone in authority she could approach without causing a disruption. She spotted a police officer standing about 20 feet away from her position. The officer was watching the crowd rather than the ceremony itself, which meant he might be more receptive to being approached discreetly. Moving carefully through the crowd, Sarah made her way toward the officer. She had to be strategic about this approach. Running or moving too quickly would draw unwanted attention from both security personnel and other tourists. She also couldn't afford to waste time, as the guard's condition was clearly worsening by the minute. When she reached the officer, Sarah gently touched his arm to get his attention. The officer, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, turned to look at her with a professional but friendly expression. Sarah could see his name badge read Constable Williams. "Excuse me, officer?" Sarah whispered urgently. "I need to report a medical emergency, but I don't want to cause panic in the crowd." Constable Williams immediately became more alert. His training had taught him to take any report of emergency seriously, especially in such a high-profile location with thousands of people present. "What kind of emergency, miss?" he asked quietly, leaning closer to hear her over the noise of the crowd. Sarah quickly explained what she had observed about the guard's condition. She described his pale complexion, labored breathing, trembling hands, and apparent struggle to maintain consciousness. She emphasized her background as a nurse and her confidence in recognizing medical distress. The officer listened intently, occasionally glancing toward the line of guards to try to identify which one Sarah was describing. His expression grew more serious as she detailed her observations. "Which guard specifically?" Constable Williams asked, following Sarah's gaze toward the ceremonial formation. Sarah discreetly pointed toward the guard who had caught her attention. From their position, the officer could indeed see signs of the distress Sarah had described. The guard's face was visibly pale, and his posture, while still military straight, showed subtle signs of strain. Constable Williams immediately understood the delicate nature of the situation. Interrupting a royal ceremony could have serious diplomatic and security implications. However, allowing a guard to collapse during the ceremony would be far worse. He needed to act quickly but with extreme discretion. "Stay here," he instructed Sarah quietly. "Don't draw any attention to yourself or the situation. I'm going to contact the ceremony coordinator." The officer moved away from Sarah and spoke quietly into his radio, using codes and terminology that the general public wouldn't understand. Sarah watched as he communicated the emergency to his superiors while maintaining a calm exterior that wouldn't alarm nearby tourists. Within moments, Sarah noticed increased activity among the security personnel. Several plainclothes officers began moving discreetly into new positions, and she could see officials near the palace entrance having urgent but quiet conversations. Meanwhile, the guard's condition continued to deteriorate. Sarah kept her eyes on him, while trying to appear as just another tourist enjoying the ceremony. She could see him struggling more visibly now, his grip on his rifle becoming increasingly unsteady. Suddenly, Sarah noticed something that made her heart sink. The guard's legs began to buckle more noticeably. and she realized he was about to collapse. The official response, while swift, might not be fast enough to prevent a public incident that could endanger both the guard and the crowd around him. Without thinking about potential consequences, Sarah made a split-second decision. She needed to create a distraction that would allow officials to intervene without drawing attention to the guard's medical crisis. Sarah began moving toward the front of the crowd, pretending to take photographs like any other tourist. As she got closer to the ceremonial area, she positioned herself where she could make eye contact with the struggling guard again. When their eyes met, Sarah did something that went against every instinct about respecting formal protocol. She raised her hand and made a small, discreet gesture toward him. A simple thumbs-up sign followed by pointing discreetly toward where Constable Williams was coordinating the response. The guard's eyes widened slightly, and Sarah could see understanding dawn on his face. He realized that help was coming, and that someone had noticed his distress. This small communication seemed to give him the psychological boost he needed to hold on just a little longer. But Sarah's gesture had been noticed by more than just the intended guard. Another guard in the formation had seen the exchange, and protocol required him to report any unusual interaction between civilians and ceremonial guards. He began to signal to his commanding officer about the potential security breach. Sarah suddenly found herself in a complicated situation. Her attempt to help had now potentially created a security incident. She could see additional security personnel beginning to move in her direction, clearly intending to question or detain her for interfering with the ceremony. At the same time, the medical emergency was reaching a critical point. The original guard was now visibly swaying, and Sarah could see that he had only moments before he would either collapse or be forced to break formation to seek help. Constable Williams, who had been monitoring Sarah's position, realized what was happening. He could see that she was about to be detained for a security violation, just as the medical response was being implemented. He had to make a quick decision about how to handle both situations simultaneously. The crowd around them remained largely oblivious to the multiple dramas unfolding before their eyes. They continued taking pictures and enjoying what they assumed was a routine ceremonial display. Children pointed excitedly at the guards, parents explained the historical significance of the tradition, and tour guides continued their rehearsed presentations. But for those involved in the emergency response, the next few moments would be critical. Sarah's simple gesture of compassion had set in motion a complex chain of events that would test everyone's ability to prioritize human welfare while maintaining security and protocol. As security officers approached Sarah's position and medical personnel prepared to intervene with the distressed guard, the ceremony continued around them. The collision of human kindness, official protocol, and emergency response was about to create a situation that none of them had been trained to handle. The guard who had spotted Sarah's gesture continued to signal his concerns to his superiors, while the struggling guard fought to maintain consciousness long enough for help to arrive. Sarah stood frozen between approaching security officers and her desire to continue helping someone in medical distress. Everything that happened next would depend on how quickly and effectively the various authorities could coordinate their response to an unprecedented situation during one of Britain's most formal and closely watched ceremonies. As the security officers approached Sarah, Constable Williams made a crucial intervention. He quickly stepped between Sarah and the approaching officers, flashing his identification and speaking in urgent, hushed tones. Sarah couldn't hear exactly what he was saying, but she could see him gesturing toward the distressed guard and then back to her. The other officers paused, clearly receiving an explanation that changed their understanding of the situation. Instead of treating Sarah as a potential security threat, they began to see her as the person who had identified a legitimate emergency. Meanwhile, the ceremony coordinator had received the medical alert and was faced with an unprecedented decision. Stopping or interrupting the ceremony would be highly unusual and could cause international embarrassment. However, allowing a guard to collapse during the ceremony would be far worse for everyone involved. The coordinator made a swift decision to implement what was known as a discreet intervention protocol. This rarely used procedure allowed for emergency medical assistance to be provided without officially stopping or acknowledging any interruption to the ceremony. Sarah watched as several things began happening simultaneously. A group of what appeared to be tourists began moving closer to the guard formation, but she now realized these were plainclothes medical personnel and security experts. They positioned themselves in such a way that they could quickly reach the distressed guard while appearing to be ordinary spectators. At the same time, other guards in the formation received discrete signals through an internal communication system. They began making subtle adjustments to their positions that would allow for one guard to be temporarily replaced without disrupting the overall ceremony. The struggling guard, whom Sarah later learned was named James Thompson, was now barely maintaining consciousness. His face had gone completely white, and perspiration was clearly visible despite the cool morning air. His rifle was trembling in his hands, and his knees were locked in a desperate attempt to remain upright. Sarah noticed that Guard Thompson's eyes kept darting toward the medical personnel, who were discreetly positioning themselves nearby. She could see hope and relief beginning to replace the panic in his expression as he realized help was finally within reach. Suddenly, one of the plainclothes medical personnel made their move. Dr. Patricia Hayes, an emergency physician who worked with royal security on high-profile events, approached the guard formation as if she were simply a curious tourist getting a closer look. As Dr. Hayes moved past Guard Thompson, she made brief eye contact with him and whispered barely audible instructions. "Hold on. James, we're going to get you out of there in about 30 seconds. Try to take slow, deep breaths." The use of his first name surprised Thompson. The fact that the emergency responders knew who he was and had a plan in place gave him the psychological strength. He needed to hold on just a little longer. Dr. Hayes then moved to a predetermined position and gave a subtle hand signal to the ceremony coordinator. What happened next was like watching a carefully choreographed dance that had been practiced for exactly this type of situation. Two replacement guards, who had been standing by as part of the standard emergency protocol, began walking toward the ceremony formation. To the crowd, it appeared to be a normal part of the changing ceremony. The timing and movement looked completely natural and planned. As the replacement guards approached, the guards on either side of Thompson received signals through their earpieces. They began to close ranks slightly, creating a human screen that would momentarily block the crowd's view of Thompson's position. Sarah watched in amazement as Guard Thompson was smoothly and almost invisibly replaced by one of the substitutes. The transition happened so quickly and seamlessly that most of the crowd didn't even notice that anything had changed. Thompson, now free from his ceremonial duties, was immediately surrounded by the discreet medical team. Dr. Hayes quickly assessed his condition while other personnel created a casual-looking group that blocked the crowd's view of the medical evaluation. Sarah could see Dr. Hayes checking Thompson's pulse, looking at his eyes and asking him quiet questions. After a brief examination, she signaled to her team, and they began moving Thompson away from the ceremony area toward a waiting medical vehicle that had been positioned nearby. The crowd continued watching the ceremony, completely unaware that they had just witnessed an extraordinary example of emergency response coordination. The replacement guard had taken his position flawlessly, and the ceremony continued without any apparent interruption. Constable Williams approached Sarah with the expression of gratitude and professional respect. "Miss, I need to thank you for your quick thinking and discretion. Your nursing background and careful observation may have prevented a serious medical incident." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and continued concern. "Is he going to be okay? What was wrong with him?" "The medical team will take good care of him," Williams replied. Based on what Dr. Hayes observed, it appears he was experiencing a severe panic attack combined with dehydration. These ceremonies can be extremely stressful, especially for newer guards, and the physical demands are significant. Williams continued, "What you did took courage and good judgment. You found a way to alert authorities without causing panic, and your discreet signal to the guard helped him hold on until medical assistance could reach him." Sarah learned that Guard Thompson had only been assigned to ceremonial duties for 2 months. The pressure of performing in front of thousands of tourists and cameras, combined with the physical demands of standing perfectly still for extended periods, had triggered a severe anxiety response. "The gesture you made to him," Williams explained, "letting him know that help was coming was exactly what he needed at that moment. Sometimes just knowing that someone cares and that help is on the way can make all the difference." As the ceremony continued, Sarah found herself thinking about the incredible coordination she had witnessed. The emergency response had involved multiple departments: medical personnel, security officers, and ceremonial guards, all working together to handle an unprecedented situation. She also thought about Guard Thompson and hoped he would recover quickly from his ordeal. Sarah realized that behind the pageantry and tradition of royal ceremonies were real people doing demanding jobs under enormous pressure. The crowd around her continued enjoying the ceremony, taking photos and sharing the experience with friends and family. None of them knew that they had just witnessed an extraordinary example of human compassion, professional coordination, and emergency response that had prevented what could have been a tragic incident. As the ceremony neared its conclusion, Sarah felt proud of her decision to speak up when she noticed someone in distress. Her background as a nurse had prepared her to recognize medical emergencies, but her humanity had motivated her to act, despite the potential risks and complications. After the ceremony concluded, Constable Williams approached Sarah again. "Miss, I need to ask you to come with me for a brief debriefing. This is standard procedure for any civilian who assists in an emergency response during a royal ceremony." Sarah felt a moment of nervousness, wondering if she was in some kind of trouble despite the officer's earlier thanks. Williams seemed to sense her concern and quickly added, "You're not in any trouble at all. In fact, quite the opposite. There are some people who would like to meet you and thank you personally." As they walked toward a discreet entrance to the palace grounds, Sarah couldn't believe what was happening. She had come to London as a tourist hoping to see a traditional ceremony, and now she was being escorted into areas that most visitors never got to see. Williams led her through several security checkpoints where personnel clearly knew to expect them. Sarah noticed that everyone they encountered treated her with respect and gratitude rather than suspicion. Word of her actions had apparently spread quickly through the security network. They arrived at a small, comfortable office where several people were waiting. Dr. Hayes was there, having just returned from accompanying Guard Thompson to the medical facility. Also present was Commander Robert Sterling, the officer in charge of ceremonial guard operations, and surprisingly, a woman in civilian clothes who introduced herself as Lady Margaret Thornberry, a representative from the royal household. "Miss Martinez," Lady Thornberry began, "we understand that you were the person who first identified Guard Thompson's medical emergency and alerted authorities. We want to thank you for your quick thinking and discretion." Dr. Hayes stepped forward to provide an update on Thompson's condition. "James is doing much better now. He experienced what we call a vasovagal episode, essentially a severe panic attack combined with dehydration and the physical stress of standing motionless for an extended period. With proper treatment and some rest, he should make a full recovery," Commander Sterling added. What made this situation particularly dangerous was that James felt he couldn't break protocol to seek help. The ceremonial guards are trained to maintain their positions regardless of personal discomfort, sometimes to their own detriment. Sarah learned that similar incidents had occurred before, but usually the guards would simply faint and fall, creating a dramatic scene that would disrupt the ceremony and potentially cause panic among the crowds of tourists and onlookers. "Your intervention," Lady Thornberry explained, "allowed us to handle this as a proper medical emergency, rather than having it become a public spectacle that could have endangered both James and the crowd around him." Sarah was amazed to learn about the complex planning and preparation that went into handling such emergencies. The discreet medical personnel, the replacement guards, the communication systems, and the coordination protocols had all been developed over years of experience with similar situations. "The signal you gave to James," Dr. Hayes noted, "was particularly important. When someone is experiencing a panic attack, knowing that help is coming and that they're not alone can be the difference between maintaining control and losing consciousness completely." Commander Sterling then shared something that surprised Sarah even more. "James specifically asked to meet you when he's feeling better. He wants to thank you personally for what you did." Lady Thornberry smiled warmly. "We've arranged for you to visit him tomorrow if you're available. He's resting at the Royal Army Medical Corps facility, and he should be well enough for a brief visit by then." Sarah agreed immediately, touched that the guard she had helped wanted to meet her. She had acted on instinct and training, never expecting that her simple gesture of concern would lead to such an extraordinary chain of events. As the meeting continued, Sarah learned more about the pressures and challenges faced by the ceremonial guards. These were active military personnel who had been selected not only for their military skills but also for their ability to perform under the intense scrutiny of public ceremonies. The mental and physical demands are significant, Commander Sterling explained. Standing perfectly still for hours while wearing heavy uniforms and carrying rifles, all while being watched by thousands of people and countless cameras, requires exceptional discipline and conditioning, Dr. Hayes added. We've been working to improve the support systems for guards who experience anxiety or panic during ceremonies. Your actions today have actually helped us identify some improvements we can make to our emergency response protocols. Sarah was surprised to learn that her experience as a tourist would contribute to improving the safety procedures for future ceremonies. Lady Thornberry explained that they would be reviewing the incident to identify best practices for similar situations. One thing we've learned, Lady Thornberry said, is the value of having trained medical personnel in the crowd who can recognize and report emergencies discreetly. We're considering developing a program to identify and coordinate with medical professionals who attend royal ceremonies. As the debriefing concluded, Sarah was given a special tour of areas of the palace that were normally off-limits to the public. She saw the preparation areas where guards got ready for ceremonies, the medical facilities that supported royal events, and some of the historical artifacts related to the ceremonial traditions. During the tour, she met other guards who had heard about the morning's incident. Many of them thanked her personally for looking out for their colleague and for handling the situation with such discretion and care. What you did matters more than you probably realize, one senior guard told her. We all know that sometimes we might need help during a ceremony, but the protocol makes it very difficult to ask for assistance. Knowing that there are people in the crowd who might notice and care enough to help makes us feel safer. As Sarah prepared to leave, Lady Thornberry handed her a formal letter of thanks from the royal household and a special commemorative item that was rarely given to members of the public. This is a small token of our appreciation, Lady Thornberry said, but more importantly, we hope you understand how much your actions meant to James and to all of us, who are responsible for the safety and welfare of the people who serve in these ceremonies. Walking back through London that evening, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary day she had experienced. She had started the morning as a tourist hoping to see a traditional ceremony, and ended it as someone who had played a crucial role in preventing a potential tragedy. She thought about Guard Thompson and looked forward to meeting him the next day. Sarah realized that her decision to act on compassion and training, despite the potential risks and complications, had created connections and experiences that would stay with her for the rest of her life. The simple gesture she had made, a thumbs up and a discreet point toward help, had communicated hope and care across the formal barriers of royal protocol and had ultimately saved someone from a medical crisis that could have had serious consequences. 6 months after Sarah returned to Spain, she received an unexpected phone call that would bring her story full circle. Lady Margaret Thornberry was calling to invite her back to London for a very special occasion. Miss Martinez, Lady Thornberry said warmly, we would like to invite you to attend a ceremony recognizing civilians who have made exceptional contributions to the safety and welfare of royal personnel. Your actions during Guard Thompson's medical emergency have been selected for formal recognition. Sarah was stunned by the invitation. She had never expected that her simple act of compassion would lead to such an honor. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 months later, and all expenses for her return trip to London would be covered by the royal household. When Sarah arrived in London for the recognition ceremony, she was amazed by the welcome she received. Constable Williams met her at the airport, and she was transported to accommodations that had been arranged at a historic hotel near the palace. The evening before the ceremony, Sarah was invited to a private dinner, where she was reunited with several people who had been involved in the emergency response. Dr. Hayes was there, along with Commander Sterling, and to her delight, Guard Thompson himself. Thompson looked completely different from when she had last seen him in the medical facility. He was confident, healthy, and wearing his dress uniform with obvious pride. He had not only returned to ceremonial duties but had been promoted, and was now helping to train other guards in stress management and emergency procedures. Sarah, Thompson said, embracing her warmly, I can't tell you how much your actions changed my life. Not only did you help me through that medical crisis, but the way you handled the situation taught me and everyone else involved about the importance of looking out for each other. During dinner, Sarah learned about the changes that had been implemented as a result of her actions and the subsequent review of emergency procedures. A new protocol had been established that included better pre-ceremony health assessments, discreet medical personnel positioned throughout the crowd during ceremonies, and improved communication systems for guards who might need assistance. Your quick thinking and professional approach have literally made royal ceremonies safer for everyone involved, Commander Sterling explained. Dr. Hayes shared that they had also established a new training program for medical professionals who attended royal ceremonies as tourists. We now have a discreet network of healthcare workers who can be contacted if they're attending ceremonies, so we have additional trained eyes in the crowd to watch for medical emergencies. Sarah was amazed to learn that her experience had led to such comprehensive improvements, but what touched her most was hearing about Thompson's personal growth and recovery. After the incident, Thompson explained, I went through counseling to address the anxiety I had been experiencing. But more importantly, I learned that asking for help isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of wisdom and self-awareness. Thompson had become an advocate within the Guard unit for mental health awareness and stress management. He now spoke to new ceremonial guards about the importance of recognizing their own limits in the support systems available to them. The recognition ceremony the next day was held in a beautiful hall within the palace grounds. Sarah was surprised by the number of people in attendance, including representatives from various military units, medical organizations, and royal household staff. As she was called forward to receive her recognition, Sarah felt overwhelmed by the significance of the moment. Lady Thornberry presented her with a special medal recognizing her exceptional service to the crown through her compassionate and professional response to a medical emergency during a royal ceremony. But the most meaningful part of the ceremony came when Thompson stepped forward to present Sarah with a personal gift, a beautifully crafted photo album documenting the changes that had been made to ceremonial procedures as a result of her actions. This album, Thompson said, shows how one person's compassion and courage can create positive change that benefits countless others. Every guard who serves in ceremonies from now on will be safer because of what you did that day. The album included photos of the new medical training programs, the improved communication equipment, and testimonials from guards who had benefited from the enhanced safety protocols. It also included pictures from Thompson's own recovery and his new role in training other guards. After the ceremony, Sarah was given another private tour of the palace, this time including areas that showcased the history of civilian contributions to royal service. She learned that throughout history, ordinary citizens had occasionally played extraordinary roles in protecting and assisting royal personnel. Your story, Lady Thornberry explained, has become part of that tradition. It will be remembered and shared as an example of how individual courage and compassion can make a real difference. As Sarah prepared to return to Spain again, she reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with a simple tourist visit to watch a ceremonial changing of the guard. Her decision to speak up when she saw someone in distress had not only saved Thompson from a medical crisis but had also led to systemic improvements that would benefit many others. Thompson accompanied her to the airport for her departure, and they talked about their plans to stay in touch and the possibility of him visiting Spain in the future. They had formed a genuine friendship that transcended the dramatic circumstances of their first meeting. You know, Thompson said as they said goodbye, sometimes I think about what might have happened if you hadn't been in the crowd that day, or if you had decided not to get involved. It makes me realize how much our lives can be changed by the kindness and courage of strangers. Sarah returned to her job as a nurse in Spain, with a new perspective on the impact that individual actions can have. She began sharing her story with colleagues and students, emphasizing the importance of speaking up when they see someone in need, regardless of the setting or potential complications. The story of Sarah's secret signal to guard Thompson became well known within royal security circles and was eventually shared more broadly as an example of effective emergency response and civilian cooperation. Training programs for both security personnel and medical professionals began incorporating lessons learned from the incident. Years later, Sarah would still receive occasional updates from Thompson about his continued service and the ongoing improvements to ceremonial safety procedures. Their friendship, born from a moment of crisis and compassion, had endured and grown stronger over time. The simple, thumbs-up gesture that Sarah had made during that October morning ceremony had become a symbol of human connection and care that transcended formal protocols and national boundaries. It reminded everyone involved that behind the pageantry and tradition of royal ceremonies were real people deserving of compassion, support, and protection. Sarah's story demonstrated that extraordinary heroism often begins with ordinary people, making the simple choice to care about the welfare of others, even when it would be easier to look away or assume that someone else will handle the problem. In the end, what had started as a tourist's observation of a royal ceremony had become a lasting example of how individual courage, professional training, and human compassion could work together to prevent tragedy and create positive change for countless others.